Welcome to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. Each episode will tear down a myth, kick a social norm in the beanbag, gut punch a sex ed untruth, or destroy a poorly constructed relationship expectation. Get ready to unlearn all the crap you accepted as fact. Strap in for a mind-blowing revision on what sex is and what it can do. Prepare yourself for a whole new thought pattern when it comes to modern relationships. And now, here's your host, Jenny Simus, the Intimacy Ally, relationship expert and certified sex and intimacy coach.
Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. It is me, Jenny Simus Leety, and I am joined today by this hella cool dude, Courtney Brame. He is the founder, executive director, creator, initiator, podcaster of Something Positive for Positive People. And he is a peaceful warrior for herpes stigma. All right. He is like trying to cool it down, get it down. Right. So I want to let Courtney kind of introduce himself, and then I'm going to bother him and pester him and get information out of him. So, Courtney, talk to my listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Courtney Brame. I'm the founder, executive director, podcast host of Something Positive for Positive People. This is an organization that provides support resources to people who are navigating herpes stigma. I tell everybody I don't do anything regarding outbreaks. Like, we can have a conversation about like your options for treatment, but I always tell everybody I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. But I find that just generally being someone who's open about my status invites people who, just need some relatability, some sense of understanding to just have a conversation and then begin to not only learn what works best for them navigating stigma, but also just what their options are outside of their realm of perspective. So people have called me a number of other things, one of which is like a coach too, because I always say, like, while the conversation around herpes is what draws people in, I'd say that's maybe 5 to 10% of what I talk to people about, because so much of it is people come in with a question about herpes, and I'm like, well, I need to know about you. Like, talk to me about you. What was going on when you got your diagnosis? Let's talk more about those things. And, before long, the prioritization of herpes begins to just sort of diminish and minimize itself, because people start to see themselves more as a whole person rather than their diagnosis. So through those support calls and the creation of community and support things and yoga and meditation classes, I try and just get people to that place where they see themselves outside their diagnosis.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So how did you get started in this work? What made you realize, like, oh, this is my calling?
Well, I was diagnosed with genital herpes in 2013. And for the first 4 years of that, I was just going through the motions of dating and disclosing and dealing with the rejection or not rejection, whatever. And then it was in 2017 that I found that there were communities out there, people who were living with herpes. And when I got into those communities, I saw that I don't want to say a lot, but I saw it enough times for it to be a thing, that people would openly post or share that they wanted to kill themselves because of their herpes diagnosis. And when I saw it enough times, I got curious, right? And in that curiosity, I began to just interview people, asking them about their experience with herpes and their experiences with dating, disclosure, sex, all of those things. And the more I asked questions, like, the more people wanted to be a part of it. I started to share the episodes in these communities and spaces and just offer, hey, if anybody wants to just share their experience anonymously, which I think was a huge factor here.
Right.
Worked out so well was because people just have their voices out there. They can make up a name, or they can just use their first name and really just talk about their experience for the first time. And so that became an ongoing thing that is Something Positive for Positive People. The podcast now has 330 something. Well, no, actually closer to 350 podcast episodes if you include the bonus episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years. In 2019, I registered for nonprofit status, and I was raising money to pay for people to get therapy. There have been issues with that, mostly accessibility issues. So now I make referrals so people have the resources to be able to get therapy, then yay. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
currently in yoga therapy school to be able to offer something, just
Right.
utilizing the science of yoga to just restore balances in people's emotional state more so than anything. I got into yoga right after my diagnosis, and I've only had 3 outbreaks, and I know you called me like a peaceful warrior, and I really, before I knew what yoga and meditation were doing for me,
Mm-hmm.
it was making a difference. I knew something was happening. I didn't have language until I went and explored yoga more deeply. I got the 200-hour certification, and I learned how to put people in poses. And then I
Mm-hmm.
got the 300-hour, which gave me more of the in-depth philosophy behind it and more understanding of uh, the non-movement parts of yoga, if you will. And that gave me language to sort of bridge the gap and being able to say to people, like, I don't know if you ever met somebody who was like, well, have you tried yoga? And like how that can be received from a place.
Yes, as a fat chick, I have had people be like, "Well, have you tried yoga?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes, yes, yes."
Mhm.
I'm also like a disabled on a leg person, so some poses in yoga can be challenging, but there are other parts of it that are incredibly helpful. So I have gone from that angry smoker, young 20s, like fuck you kind of lady to like the, you know what? I'm in my 40s now. Yeah, this could totally be a thing. Hmm.
Yeah. And that's, and you spoke to that beautifully, like having certain limitations, right, in the body. As a yoga therapist, when yoga teachers, typically there's a class and you just do what you can, but yoga therapy has a more uh, customized, focused approach to you, your
Hmm.
body, your needs, right? And so understanding that you might struggle to have balance on one of those legs or that things are painful, right? So
Hmm.
we give you the tools to be able to practice in a way that works for your body, for your emotional state, and for your goals. So yeah, I'm working on that. I just started, so I'm practicing what I can
Hmm.
leading up to it. But I still teach yoga classes, like one-on-one as well as group, and it's a really beautiful means of support as well for people who are navigating the complex emotions of their herpes diagnosis.
Hmm. Now, do you do that in person as well as virtual? Is it
Oh, I
all
would
virtual?
love to be able to just do this in person.
Hmm.
I'm looking for spaces because I just moved to New Jersey, so I'm close to
Mm,
New York, and
okay.
I'm seeking spaces that will allow me to offer like donation-based yoga without having to pay a ton of money for the overhead.
Hmm.
But I'm seeing places at like $200 for a class, and it's like, well, I might have 3 people show up and make $5 for that.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense to do that. So I'm after the conference, which is upcoming Thursday. I'll be able to sit down and do a lot more planning and like reaching out to people because there's no reason I shouldn't be able to get something like this sponsored by a donor to be able to just host these classes.
Right. I'll talk to the psychotherapy chicks I know up in New
Ooh,
Jersey and see what they got. Cause
let me know.
yeah. So you brought up the conference just now, so I feel like I kind of want to touch on that. I want to know, this is the virtual Herpes Stigma Conference that's happening from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, and that is Thursday, May 23rd. It is coming so soon. Tell me about it.
Yes.
How did it
Yeah.
start?
So.
Where is it going? What's happening?
Mhm. Well, it started long before I even knew that this was going to be a thing. So in 2021, I created a survey. I asked all of the communities of people living with herpes. I was like, what do you wish you knew? What do you wish other people knew? What do you want to know? And aside from like exact transmission rates, I was able to get a lot of questions out of what people gave to me. So I put that together in a survey on Google Forms, sent it out, and we were able to get about 1,200 responses in total. So
Whoa.
1,200 responses, all from people who are living with herpes, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then over time, I put together like some presentations, some slideshows. And I remember one day I cleaned out my Google Drive and I lost the actual survey. So all I have are like some screenshots, and those
Oh,
screenshots can be found at spfpp.org/data. So you'll
okay.
have like some of that information, but there was a lot of really good stuff that got lost in the survey that I just hadn't used. And
Mm-hmm.
so 2023, 2024, well, in 2023, I was approached by Utah Valley University, and the principal investigator wanted to like sort of revisit that survey, the data that was out there, and put it together. So we were able to get the International Review Board, IRB, approval to just make sure that people's email addresses and integrity was in line, and that everyone understood what they were doing and
Mm-hmm.
what they were participating in. We did that. We sort of recreated the survey and expanded on it a lot and used a different software. And that data that came in is what I'm going to be presenting as the keynote. So I'm not like breaking it down, I'm putting it on paper and I'm just telling the story. So I
Okay.
wanted it to be more than just me like talking and pointing at charts, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
invited Dr. Eveline Dacker, who's going to speak to best practices for taking a stigma-free sexual history and give the STARS talk as
Mm-hmm.
well. I've got Nikita Fernandez, who's a sex therapist and psychotherapist, who's going to speak to the mental health components of navigating herpes stigma.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have the No Shame in This Game film documentary showing, and then we will also have a sexuality educator,
Mm-hmm.
Dakota Rampin, who's going to speak to like how Eveline speaks about stars, but
Mm-hmm.
applying that to youth. So this is stigma minimization in sexuality education, and what we can do directly in our sex education to minimize the impacts of stigma. The American Sexual Health Association is going to make an announcement and just like offer up their resources as a
Mm-hmm.
sponsor of the conference. And then I'll be for an hour. I have easily 2.5 to 3 hours of information that I have to condense into an hour. I'm going to make this as wonderful as possible, but I have so much information and so much to like say in such a short period of time that I know when I plan for the next conference to give myself a little bit more of a window to be able to facilitate this. But yeah, that's the overall conference. The theme of it this year is sexual health is mental health.
Okay.
I think that from the information that we have, we've got at least 10 themes. So I do want to make this an annual thing. I would like to be able to offer continuing education credits in the future. So once the conference is done, I'm going to be submitting my applications for that, so
Mm-hmm.
that each year maybe we can have something that's a little, something special for not just the healthcare providers, not just for people with herpes, but for people in general to just be able to come and learn from, right? Like lovers of people who have herpes, and the people who might, want to just learn more, who might not necessarily be in the medical field. So my
Mm-hmm.
intention is to just make this be the introductory launch pad for
Mm-hmm.
people to see something positive for positive people as a credible enough resource to be able to share as a herpes education resource.
And it's so needed. Like, it is so necessary. I still think that when I talk to most people, the image that they have in their head, and I don't know if it's just because like we're this age range or because I'm dealing with like mostly, newly single women in their 40s, they immediately go to Joey Tribbiani on Friends when he did the ad he didn't know what he was modeling for, and then suddenly his picture was all over New York City as, "You may not be able to tell, but I've got herpes." And that's immediately what they go to, and they're like, "Well, you never know when I start going on these dating sites if that's gonna be the guy." And I was like, "Well, here's the thing, you could ask." Like, you could ask. And here's another thing, honey llama. I just want to tell you, herpes wasn't on the regular screener that you got. And you're divorced. You don't know necessarily if the old man was stepping out on you. maybe it's something that you should go and find out, for yourself, just for your own peace of mind, because you could be thinking that you're about to like point a finger at somebody else when you've got three pointing right back at you, just to
Yeah.
let you know. And I'm like, but not as big a deal as I think that you think it is. And here's some information that I would like to share with you about that.
Yeah.
So go ahead, comment on all of that, because that is legit what I'm getting from these chicks.
Yeah, and part of that too is the information that's out there, right? We don't have good information. Herpes is a tricky virus, and that's what a lot of the most knowledgeable healthcare professionals will say, is that we just don't know enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about, we assume that just because we have herpes that it means someone cheated. No, someone could have just not known their status.
Right.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that we're seeing too, one of the statistics on the survey, I forget the exact number, but I think about 14% of people had symptoms before they were even 18 years old, their first herpes symptoms. And
Mm-hmm.
what I've learned, like in one of my first podcast interviews with a doctor, I don't want to say the wrong name because this was in 2017, but
Whew.
he said that the only difference really between HSV1 and HSV2 is, like, we call type 1 primarily oral, it's cold sores. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants to associate kids with sex, so
Right.
therefore we're going to give it a different name. So while it's the same virus, it's treated with the same medication, it has the same presentations, it has the same the way that it works is all the same. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that sex is associated with it is what gives the stigma to it. If it were just, I have herpes, and we leave it at that, it wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be an issue, because people would see it as just cold sores. They'd see it as on the fingers, or,
Mm-hmm.
on the low back, the ankle, the elbow, right? And also it can get passed on to your genitals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we default to the genitals, and then we learn about it being able to show up on these other places. But what would happen if we were to flip that around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh yeah, sometimes I get a cold sore on my lip. Oh, I get herpes whitlow on my finger. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm having an outbreak. Because then we'd be looking at like a actual skin condition, which a lot of people mistake herpes for. The reality is that it's a nerve condition. It's a virus that lives in the bundles of the nerves. If you have
Mm-hmm.
genital outbreaks, it's at the base of the spine. If you have oral outbreaks, it's at the nerve bundles in like the nape area.
Mm-hmm.
So it just comes out when living conditions maybe get a little harsh. I know that stress is a major trigger for a lot of people, as well as, like, if you're struggling with health issues and your immune system's down, that, like, essentially, our bodies host a lot of different viruses, bacteria, all types of things are living in, on, and around us in
Mm-hmm.
cohesion. Like, everything, when in balance, we're good, right?
Right.
But herpes itself is like a tenant in one of the rooms where the air conditioning went out, and when you're having an outbreak, it's like banging on the door of the leasing office, like, "Yo, you need to fix my AC,
Right.
or else I'm looking to get out of here." And looking to get out of here is, bam, outbreak and
Mm-hmm.
transmission. I need a new body. But you fix the AC, maybe that looks like being still. Maybe it looks like prioritizing more of your own needs, especially in this like high intense go 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 environment that we live
Yes.
in, right? It may look like that, and then before you know it, herpes just goes back into the house and it's just chilling watching TV. So
Right.
when we can look at it as just like a cohabitant of our body, and it just lets us know we need to chill and we need to take better care of the apartment complex that is our body. I
Mm-hmm.
think that gives us a little bit more of a general understanding that we don't really need to understand the virus. You know what I'm saying? We just got to understand our bodies, take care of our bodies, take care of our mental health, emotional health, do what's important to us. And herpes becomes a non-issue until you have symptoms or until you need to tell someone.
Right. That's excellent. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good explanation of it, and how it is like this thing that is existing within you, but it is not you, and that you do have limited but some control over how big or how much it is going to be seen or felt in your body.
Yes.
Much like, like you said, many, autoimmune or I guess chronic issues, they'll all come down to like inflammation and stress. And this is another one of those. It's just that, people get so caught up on the sex part. And that does make me want to talk about like the transmission. But do you want to talk about transmission or like what you found from the survey or any of that?
Yes. So what people try to do when they look up and look for transmission rates is they want to provide their partner with more comfort to be more willing to sleep with them despite them having herpes, right? The
Mm-hmm.
reality is what a person wants to hear is if I do these things, I will not get herpes from you. There is no information that exists that says that except don't have sex. Don't have sex with anybody. Don't have sex with anyone unless they know like that day in that moment and haven't had any other skin to skin contact exposure with another human being, that they don't have herpes and that you don't have herpes. That's how we don't get herpes, right? Or don't get exposed to it. Let's just say that.
Right.
So that statistic doesn't exist because even with condom use and antivirals, we can only lower the possibility of transmission. And
Mm-hmm.
lowering the possibility of transmission doesn't tell the other person what they want to hear, which is that if I do these things, then I won't get herpes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that what's more valuable is on the data tab of the website, there's a stat that I ask people, have you had a partner who's consented to sex without barriers with you? And like 76% of people said yes. And then the follow-up question was, to your knowledge, have you passed herpes on to one of your partners who didn't have herpes? And I
Mm-hmm.
believe it was 78% of people who said, no, they have not passed it on. So it means more to me that 78% of people have been able to say that they didn't pass herpes on to a partner who didn't have herpes
Mm-hmm.
than if we have sex, there's a 2% chance of you getting it. What is 2%? Does that mean 2 out of every 100 strokes? 2 out of every 100 times we have sex? So what, do I stop at 98 every time or what? And another like quick thing I'll like let you jump in is when we look at same-sex relationships, I think that people don't feel represented in the research and the statistics. One, herpes is very stigmatized, and as well as having a non-traditional relationship structure, or if you are someone who's in the LGBT community, like we've got stigma on stigma on stigma, and if you're a person of color, more stigma, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be harder to get that data. And what I invite people to look at is the data that exists essentially still tells us, right? It might not be intercourse, penis, and vagina, but it's genital to genital contact. There's
Mm-hmm.
genital to genital contact with barriers. There's genital to genital contact without barriers. So what those transmission rates are more so speaking to the kinds of skin contact being made during sex, rather than us looking at it like, well, I'm just not included. Two people with vulvas are less likely to get herpes because there's no research out there. It's something that I see people try and rationalize, but it's skin to skin contact with the affected area. So those
Mm-hmm.
transmission rates that exist that the CDC talks about, or whoever else is credible in speaking to statistics, that's what you can go off of. But I much more appreciate the statistics of 78% of people have not passed herpes on to a partner, because people think that you get it the first time you have sex with a
Mm-hmm.
person who has herpes. But the reality is you might have been with somebody you had sex with a few times who has it and didn't know they have it, or they know they have it and just didn't tell you. But the likelihood of getting it from, and I don't have percentages for this, but the likelihood of getting it from a person who knows that they have it, who's willing and able to communicate that to you, is significantly lower than someone who just tells you, oh, I don't have it.
Right. Right. And can we talk about testing a little bit, or do
Yeah,
you want to?
we can talk about
I guess about one, that it's not included on a general, if you go into your doctor and you're like, hey, I'm going to start seeing, this new person, or I'm non monogamous and we're bringing somebody else in, and I just want to, go ahead and get a rundown of STIs. If you don't ask for it, it's not something that they test for. So when I talked to my friend who is high up in the STI ranks in Arizona, she works for like the medical corps or whatever,
I
the
heard that
military.
completely different. I thought she was high up in the STI, like getting STIs.
No,
I was like,
she's not collecting. No, she's not a collector, but she's high up in the ranks of the medical corps, the military
Mhm.
who does all this medical stuff. And she's been working with HIV. And when I asked her, I was like, why is this not a thing? Like, why don't we test like everyone? I don't even know if I got tested for it when I was pregnant both times. I have no idea. I have to go back and like look through paper files to find that out. But she was like, well, because people were dying of AIDS, Jenny. And I said, okay. And she was like, yeah, no, people were dying of AIDS and it's not that bad. And that's all she said. And I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to leave it there. So how do you feel about the testing, how it gets done, whether or not it gets done, and I guess like the effectiveness, if you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, there's no accurate, consistent test that exists. There are people who get false positives, false negatives. People who might show up with clear symptoms of herpes get tested and they're like, nope, it's negative, must have been something else. And people who have no symptoms at all, who they find out that they've been tested, they test positive and they're freaking out and they immediately change up their entire lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
around their herpes diagnosis, and then they start getting outbreaks. So it's a little bit all over the place. One of the things that I recommend, and this, I need people backing me on this, right? Like it's hard to, be open to do any kind of advocacy when it's like you're yelling into a void and there's not like people behind you saying this too, is we need a better test. Like people are so focused on a cure right now. And if I would have focused on a cure for herpes when I was diagnosed, I'd have spent 11 years hoping for a cure rather than doing anything about it or living my life. And so I would love to see there be one test that says, yes, you have herpes. No, you don't have herpes, that people get annually. If we see that annually, one, we will see that a lot more people have herpes than we thought. Two, a lot more people will be much more educated and informed about what it means to have herpes, live with herpes, how likely it is, how common it is. Because people with herpes shouldn't be the first people that people who don't have herpes hear any of this information from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the world we live in where that intimate contact is so accessible, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
thumb swipe. Like one thumb swipe, you have your your next sexual partner. And it's so easy to get that, but it's such a pain. It's so difficult to get a herpes test and
Mm-hmm.
to know
A
what the
reliable
test is.
herpes
A
test.
reliable one. Yeah.
Oh,
So
don't
I
get
would
me
love to.
started because I mailed off to get the kits because I
Mhm.
was like, oh, I'm gonna do this, yeah, I'll go get the gold standard or
Yeah.
whatever test. It's $500.
hmm And it's $500 for something that might not even be right.
Right.
So, the most, what we have now is if you are experiencing symptoms, I always tell people this, right? Like, if you have symptoms, go get tested. Like, don't try and wait for it. Like, you want to know while you're having those active symptoms what this could be.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to get you your most accurate reading for what your herpes diagnosis is. If you just had sex with somebody, you wore a condom, and you're concerned that maybe they exposed you to herpes, and you go get tested 6 months after that because it's what, like 3 to 6 months before it might even show up. If you do that and then you test positive and then you blame that person, there's so many rabbit holes of thinking that we can go down,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the reality is we just can't know unless we know for sure after someone has an outbreak. So you get an outbreak, you go get it tested. And then you find out whether you're positive or negative, and whatever those results say, that's what I say people go with. If you get tested during symptoms and it says positive or negative, go with that, because I think a lot of people they allow themselves to get caught up in this back and forth internally of, oh my God, like now I have herpes, I've never had any outbreaks, like what? And then they go down these rabbit holes of looking at the forums and blogs and hearing from people who, have their own unique experiences. And we're comparing our experiences to people who have way different circumstances than we even know that could also be playing a factor in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, then you get into it like on my end, because I do all like this dating help for people and online dating and stuff like that. Then you get into the websites who are profiting off of the fear
Yes,
that people have. Do you want to talk about that at all?
I do. And I want to start by saying, like, I think that every site, every resource serves its purpose until it no longer serves its purpose. I'm someone who utilized these sites. I've utilized the support groups, the communities, and they did what they were supposed to do for me. So initially, like, I'll be honest, when I got into it, all my troubles went away. I didn't have to worry about being rejected for my herpes status because everybody had it. So then there became other things to be rejected for. Maybe some people don't like black dudes. Maybe some people don't like men. Maybe I'm not tall enough. Maybe, right? There's all these other things that have become a priority. And I think that a lot of people don't really get to that place of going through and being in the dating pool of only people who are living with herpes to see, herpes actually isn't the biggest issue in all of this. It's actually these other things. Are we compatible? Do we like the same things? Do we have the same views on where we want to be in life? Do we both want long-term relationships or short-term relationships, right? Are we sexually compatible? Right? Are you a good person? Right? We just look past all of that, and it just becomes like very like viscerally in survival mode out of scarcity, like where we're thinking to ourselves, oh, well, I have herpes, that person has herpes, and they're attractive. Let's just go for it. And there's no intentionality or thought behind the selection process, because I'm speaking for myself. Let me just speak for myself.
Right.
Being there in that environment, I think that I learned really quickly that just wasn't for me, right? Like, so I'm someone who's open about my herpes status, and I caught myself being at events where I'm a social person. I talk to people, and people ask, "Oh, who are you here with? What are you doing?" I was like, I can't answer that without outing these 70 people who are here around me. And so in order to like maintain the integrity of the group, I thought it was just best for me to not be part of the groups anymore. So I have hoped to be able to offer, support in those settings to just get people to see something different, right? Not to necessarily lock into, I can only date people who have herpes now, but to widen their scope of vision to see not only are there people who aren't in these groups who also have herpes, but there's also people who are just curious, right? Like, all right, well, I'm interested in you. Like, I see you, but also like there's this component of not really wanting to be seen, because I hid, like I really did hide for a significant amount of time in the work that I was doing. Fortunately, it was a podcast, so it was just audio only. I'd still say my name. Like, who's gonna look up me? And there's like, when you type in Courtney Brame, you're more likely to see some white girl than you would me. So, yeah. And funny thing about that, I met someone named Courtney Brame. We're about the same age, and we both lived in St. Louis. We actually ran into each other one day. But anyway,
Was she a white chick yoga teacher?
no, she was black.
Oh.
She was black.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was so surprised. Like, are we related? And we didn't find any. We didn't find.
That's awesome.
We didn't find. So all of that to say, I think that everything serves its purpose. For me, it was sort of seeing that I wanted to be seen for more than my herpes diagnosis. And so passing through, I was able to see, oh, all right, I can deal with rejection, and who I am outside of my herpes diagnosis was something that was reflected back to me as well. Because we didn't have to talk about herpes, it was avoided, but I was able to be funny. I was able to be charismatic. I was able to be seen for these intangible aspects of my identity,
Mm-hmm.
because herpes was irrelevant. So now, I leave that environment. I want to say I got like some type of Stockholm syndrome or something, because I've got like, there's still, herpes still runs my life. It just doesn't run my life in that way. That's something I would say I'm struggling with now, because for so long, for the last 11 years of my life, I've had herpes. And for the last 7, I've been prioritizing herpes in this form of herpes stigma advocacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I technically, while I left the groups and I left the environment, all I did was go off and like create my own, with a different purpose of getting people to also no longer need these. But
Right.
arguably, if I still need it, but I'm teaching people to not need it, and I, am needing it,
Mm-hmm.
am I setting a good example? But I think the short answer to your question, without me going all over the place, is like, what are my feelings about the dating sites? Uh, like I said, I think they serve their purpose. I think that if you can intentionally go there and you know what it is that you're looking for, if it's there, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And if it's not there, then you have to be willing to move on to the next one. Dating in itself is exhausting and
Yes.
emotionally draining. And then you
Mm-hmm.
add something as complex as a herpes diagnosis, or being a single parent, or
Mm-hmm.
things that kind of get lost in the mix when we are like, oh my God, I have herpes. Nobody's going to want me anymore. It's like, okay, you also, like, you're a good person,
Mm-hmm.
or you also have a lot going for you. You
You're
are some,
interesting as fuck.
yeah,
Like, you have all these other qualities. You're tall, you're short,
yeah.
you
And
have
we look
great
at that.
boobs,
We look at that
whatever.
thing, like that
Mm-hmm.
herpes thing, and we
Mm-hmm.
just forget about
And
all
it's
these
just
other beautiful.
plastered. Yeah, it's like plastered across all of it. And you have to like kind of pull
Hmm.
it down a little bit, maybe push it here
Yeah,
so that you can see all of these great qualities.
yeah,
That's so hard.
it is. It is.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate the way that you're so empathetic about it, because I think it's very easy for people outside of it to say it's just herpes, or, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to kill them, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that they're seeing the reactions that I'm seeing when, we explore that as an option when I'm talking to these people who are rejoining the dating pool. Like, that you could have it, or that your potential partners could have it. How does that make you feel? And they are like, oh my God, that makes me not want to date. And I'm like, that's what I mean. That's the stigma talking. That is not the actual effect of it talking.
You
And
know,
we're going to have to get through that. And one of the first ways is go ahead and know if you want to know. And then the second way, and know as well as you can, like you said, the tests are not accurate. The tests are not reliable, but know as well as you can, especially if you have something going on your body, then go ahead and investigate as soon as you can, because
yeah,
that's the best time. And then if that is what it is, then we need to start doing that adjacent work. We need to start looking at, okay, do you want to get on the specialized site? Do you want that to be like, okay, this is already assumed so that I don't have to discuss it? Amazing. Then I can kind of like explore all the cool shit about myself and like what people like in my profile, which pictures people do dig, da 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 da, And then if I get that confidence back, then maybe I can go on the different sites, or maybe I can just like go out to like a mixer and be like ready. Once that confidence is there, once that understanding is there, that this does not define me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that self work is so important in any type of relationship pursuit, right? Whether you want to just date and, you want to discover, or if you want a relationship and you want to discover, right? All of these things can happen with intention.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when you go into it without intention where you find yourself falling short of your expectations because you haven't established what your own expectations are. That's when people really get into trouble with themselves. That's when people start to have the emotion fatigue, the disclosure fatigue, the burnout from dating. These are all real things that can be mitigated with just a little bit of intentionality. So am I going on this dating site because I want to I want to hook up. I only want this. Or am I going on here because I want to really find somebody who I'm wanting to find a long-term relationship with? Or am I here because I'm just bored? Even that's an intention. If you're just
Mm-hmm.
bored, know that you're only there because you're just bored. And that you
Mm-hmm.
move accordingly when you're bored.
Mm-hmm.
Which I
And
find
that,
like people are
you're
just like looking
you're
for.
trying people on, or are you really out there for finding love, or do you know? You
Yeah.
know? I love to tell people, write it down. Write it down.
People be
Really
sleeping
think
on
about
writing it
it.
down. Yeah, if you write it down and it's on paper and you see it, you can tell yourself, actually that's not for me. Or you know what? This is a big deal to me. This is something that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And when people take the time to do that, like it can be a beautiful experience.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you feel about the distinctions between 1 and 2? And I guess, I mean, there are many people. I think there are probably a lot more people than they know that, like, they have had it, like, probably their whole lives.
Hmm.
Their auntie came and kissed them when they were little, and here we are.
Yeah.
So, how do you feel about that? I know that we're like, you already touched on that a bit,
Hmm.
that, we don't like to associate this as like a childhood thing because it's so associated with sex. But I feel like it should be, just because that would make people understand that it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be so stigmatized. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I would like to see it just be herpes. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's herpes, HSV, right? We got this whole family and like there's all these names and then you've got HSV1 and then you've got HSV2, right? And they're like the difference there is so insane because HSV2 is the sex type, but you can get it orally. And HSV1 is the oral type, but you can transmit it and get it, through sexual contact.
Right. So then
So
you have to have like HSV1G and HSV2O and
mhm.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and all of the differentiation between it, it's like ultimately nobody wants herpes, right? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
if you have it, I mean, I got it and I don't want it. But, having herpes and for people to just see it as this is a virus that transmits by skin to skin contact,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that does a lot for us. So the differentiation allows for people who, okay, you have herpes, right? Maybe you don't know what type you have. Maybe you haven't had an outbreak, so you don't know where it is. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you were diagnosed with HSV2 and you want to date someone who has HSV1 or vice versa. And
Mm-hmm.
like nobody wants both herpes because now you got to disclose, yeah, I got herpes. Oh, well, which type? Oh, I have both. And it's like, I have to disclose that I have two types of an STI. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
that just doubles it. That doubles the intensity of it. That doubles the stigma. So like now I got to tell people I got type 1 and 2. And I myself, so I was diagnosed with type 2 genitally in 2013. And honestly, I think he looked and just like gave me the diagnosis because
Mm-hmm.
that's what it looked like. It was genital outbreak. He gave me the treatment for it. I don't recall getting a swab back or results that said, Courtney, this is the type of herpes you have. I
Okay.
don't recall that happening. So fast forward to last February, I think it was February 2023. I was like, you know what? I wonder if I actually have type 2. So I got tested for type 2 and it came back positive. But then I was like, wait a minute. It didn't say anything about type 1. Maybe I should get tested for type 1. So I got tested
Right.
for type 1. And that came back positive as
Okay.
well. And I've had sex with people who don't have herpes. I've had sex with people who have type 1, who have type
Mm-hmm.
2, who have both. and I've only had genital outbreaks to my knowledge. I've not seen anything up
Mm-hmm.
here around my mouth or in any other area of my body. It's the 3 outbreaks that I've had over the last 11 years have been in the same spot on my penis.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I
And in the
really
same
wish.
spot, like the same spot. So it like
Mhm.
becomes re-inflamed.
Yeah, so like I know in that same spot that the presentation is the same as well,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, that it's in the same spot.
That's wild. I mean, don't you think? Well, I mean, I feel like that's wild for a virus to like, it's just laying there. It's just like lying in wait
Yeah,
until your body cannot handle stress. And then it's like, here I am.
like
Like you
hey,
said,
you
dun,
gotta
dun, dun.
fix something. So for me, I
Mm-hmm.
had the first outbreak, and I went from playing college football to not. I was over with my grandmother. She was cooking up this wonderful food all the time. I wasn't exercising anymore, so like my lifestyle just kind of like changed, and that
Mm-hmm.
drastic change, transitioning from playing sports for 13 years of my life to just not doing anything, that
Mm-hmm.
might have been what did it. I can't say when I might have been exposed to herpes, because I could have had it for a while. I could have had it
Mm-hmm.
from the first time I had sex, but I was always active and I was taking care of my body. I had like a sense of focus and purpose behind me. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden I stopped. Boom, outbreak. The second one, I was living in a new city and I had gotten fired from a job. And those same kind of feelings came up of
Mm-hmm.
not knowing what to do. Bam, outbreak. And then in 2021, I had my last outbreak from a lot of sugar and the tons of sugar. These cans. If Hawaiian Punch and Sprite made a baby, that's what these things were. And I had a lot of those over the course of a weekend. And
Did you
sure enough,
also get diabetes? Like, is that what happened?
well,
Oh
I was
no.
diagnosed.
Sorry.
Like when I went to the doctor, it was after that I was like, I think sugar is a trigger for an outbreak. So let me
Mm-hmm.
stop having so much sugar. And so I go to the doctor like a few months after that. And he was like, hey, you're like at the line for becoming pre diabetic. I was like,
Okay.
oh shit, it's a good thing I stopped like downing all that, like eating donuts and
Mm-hmm.
pounding those sugary drinks and everything. Cause it was just something I hadn't had to worry about. I never had to really look at what I was eating because I'm burning 3,000 calories like at football practice.
Right.
So uh, those were the 3 instances for me where I had an outbreak, and since then, like I've just been just mindful of what my body needs, what my
Mm-hmm.
mind needs. Like I don't listen to a whole lot of like aggressive music anymore. I do more listening to audiobooks, reading. My algorithm on social media isn't like asses all in my face all the time. Like I'm not stressed out about things. I'm following more like relationship focused content, more
Mm-hmm.
like emotions and more spiritual, like good people type content than
Right.
like the personal trainers and fitness pages, accounts and stuff. But yeah, like where I'm at in life, I still work out. I do it's not as
You?
intense
No.
as
No
it used
way.
to. Yeah. And I do yoga. I'm working to integrate more of that into my life because I just want to be able to move. Like I want to be flexible. I want to be able to
Mm-hmm.
walk up and down steps when I'm 80.
Mm-hmm. 90, 100. Come on now. Yeah.
I ain't playing on
Mobility is the thing.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
I love that you talk about like the impact of the food. Like, because it's true. Look, I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in October of 2022. They put me on Ozempic. They put me on this. They put me on that. I got so sick, whatever. When I changed my diet and my outlook, that's when my numbers started to come down. I'm almost at non-diabetic range now, and it's been 4 months.
congratulations.
Yeah.
So
So, yeah, it makes a big difference in your health, what you
mhm.
put in.
I also had a high blood pressure like since I was 22.
Oh,
Like
shit.
yeah,
You
but
were
it
stressed out, huh?
well no, it wasn't even stress. So
No.
it was I learned how to eat or like what I saw a nutritionist and she was
Mhm.
explaining to me because also I had this medical job, so a lot of things fell into place, and I learned how insulin worked. It was like your body can only absorb this much
Mhm.
it produces this much insulin, which absorbs this much carbs, and what carbs don't get absorbed turns into sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And then that sugar gets into your blood, bam, diabetes. So she explained to me like how many grams of carbs I should probably have with each meal and snack. And when she told me, I was like, wow, because I think about all the Chinese buffets that I went to, and I'm easily smashing 5 times the amount of carbs that my body would even be able to take in at one time. So bam, of course, all that sugar, but the sodium, the high blood pressure. Uh, my family always said, watch your salt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like sodium is in salt. Our
Mm-hmm.
body still needs salt because that's how we retain water. And
Right.
so I'm looking at this and I'm like, why is it that my blood pressure isn't going down? I don't put salt on my food. And over time, I started to read food labels and it was like, oh, this sauce has 20% of the daily recommended value of sodium in it. I fucking drench my chicken nuggets in it,
Mm-hmm.
that are frozen, and frozen food has a lot of that in there. So a lot
Yeah.
of this was learning what was actually, in the food, what was causing me this. And when you go out to eat, like you don't know what's in your food. So I
Mm-hmm.
started like cooking a lot of my own stuff, and that brought that down. In addition to, of course, the yoga and the meditation, I think that and exercising were my saving grace
Mm-hmm.
for me getting to a place of being able to go, oh my God, it's actually what I'm eating and how I'm eating and what's in the food.
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't say these kinds of things to like discourage people from eating, what they need for their body. I say it for people
Right.
to like understand what's in the food that you're eating is not the
Mm-hmm.
best for you.
Oh,
Uh,
and there's sugar. There's sugar in everything. There's
and
sugar in salad dressing. And they
yes,
set you up. They set you up. And it's the food companies, and I don't want to get all tinfoil hat, but
we
I
ain't
mean,
got to do
even the
that, but
American Diabetes Association, they've got all this stuff on their website, like eat 200 carbs a day. You're like, are you crazy? I have insulin resistance. No.
and while we're on that topic, I think that this is a really good point of looking at like pharmaceutical companies, right?
Yes.
Without stigma, right? I don't think that I think we'd have a cure or a vaccine or better
A
medication.
reliable fucking test.
That
How
too. Like
about
that's
that?
the starting point. I think we get a
Mm-hmm.
reliable test. But like people, they get diagnosed and immediately jump on daily medication
Oh.
because of stigma,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people don't even know if their bodies are having a reaction at all. People don't know how they're going to react. And they just
Mm-hmm.
immediately jump to, oh, I need to get on medication. I need to get on medication.
Oh yeah, I remember those commercials from when I was like in my 20s. The "It's a brand new day," the
Yeah.
Valtrex commercials.
Yeah.
That shit gets stuck in your head, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're like, "Oh, I wonder if that's like, oh, okay, there you go." Like as soon as you get it, that's all you got to do, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to be careful what I say because like the medication works, right?
Okay.
For most people. But I want to say this, like if we realize like we don't need the medication and we take more holistic approaches, like, let's look at the foods that are triggering responses to our immune system that trigger us to have outbreaks. If we do that, then there comes a time where maybe we don't need the medication because the food
We
we
let food be
consume
thy
becomes
medicine.
our medicine,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And we take the medication as we need it. Those cells go down, and then they got to do something different. They got to do
Mm-hmm.
something different. And
Mm-hmm.
the different thing being come out with a better medication. We need more people to have herpes and squeeze what we can financially out of the stigma, or we have to just make a cure because like with chlamydia, gonorrhea, I think that there's this podcast called This Podcast Will Kill You. They explored this. And what I heard was that the pharmaceutical companies, they cured chlamydia and gonorrhea, but it was like, man, what if we would have just treated it? If we treated it, we could have made a lot more money. But
Mm-hmm.
babies were being affected by that. So like you have to cure what
Mm-hmm.
causes blindness or um, uh, mortality. I think that's it. Like infant mortality rates to skyrocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's something to be said there about the medication as it exists, as well
Mm-hmm.
as like the pharmaceutical companies who are
Yeah.
making medication.
Yeah. And not encouraging people to lower their stress, or not even lower, because you can't control a lot of the stress that hits you, but be able to manage your stress,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to have the emotional ability to talk to your partners, to talk to the people you're in relationship with without raising that stress level, to be able to rebound from stressful situations like moves, like losing jobs, like having some other physical thing go on with you. Yeah. And then have that be the cure, Yeah, I don't know. So let's really quickly, because I am going to have to let you go soon, I know. Let's really quickly talk about No Shame in This Game. I want to talk to you a little bit about that.
Yeah. What you want to know? Because I'll
I
start.
mean, I guess like how you got involved in that and like
Yeah.
where that's going. Yeah.
All right. So the No Shame in This Game film is a documentary that was produced by Jolene Hernandez, who is going to be showing the documentary at the Something Positive for Positive People conference. So it's a documentary that essentially highlights the experiences of a handful of people who are living with herpes. I think one of the guys on there, he has HPV and just spoke to that experience. But Jolene herself, like when she was diagnosed, she felt like she needed to do something. So this is like our advocacy in art, if you will. Like she put on a sign that says, "I have herpes, ask me anything." And she stood in one of
Washington
those big
Square, I think.
Thank you. All right, because
Yeah.
I was about to butcher it. But yeah, and she had a film crew. They directed it, they recorded it, and they interviewed a handful of people about their experiences, and it really just, in a way, its own unique way, humanizes people who have the herpes virus. You can only see it at like screenings, showings, the way that she's like putting it together. She's creating experiences for people to be able to come to the documentary screening and be able to see it in that way rather than just like putting it out there for people to watch and then forget about, right? So
Right.
he wants this to be more of a memorable experience. And she and I are also No Shame in Something Positive for Positive People, collaborating for an event September 29th. It's going to be in New York City. We're calling it the Safe Sex Expo. And this is really just exploring the spectrum of safety and pleasure because people feel like you can't have both, right? Like the
Yeah.
about STIs is unsexy, but that's where safety is, or people not wanting to wear condoms because it doesn't feel as good, right? So we want people to be able to explore alternative options to integrate both safety and pleasure into their intimate sexual experiences with their partners as well. So yeah, I think that the expo tickets are on sale right now at spfpp.org/offerings. And when you go there, you'll be able to see that these are early bird tickets. We'll have other options for like VIP to do like a brunch and meet and greet type thing, but we'll have vendors set up throughout the venue. It's a big venue. We'll have a handful of workshops that take place over the course of the day. September 29th is on a Sunday. And yeah, we are looking for sponsors or if people want to support or make donations to help us turn this into an event. I already booked the space. That game that's covered. So yeah.
Is that happening in New York City?
It's happening in New York City. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I feel like, is Dirty Lola in New York? Maybe you should hook up with her. I feel like she is. She was at the Sexology Summit that we met at. Yeah. So I think she might be. I'll have to look. I can't remember if she's East Coast or West Coast, but she would totally be into that. To be like a vendor probably. Well, okay, don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure that that she would be into it.
Yeah.
And so for the conference that's coming up on Thursday, where can people go to get tickets to that? And if they can't make it, are there any recorded options?
Yes. So we will not record the documentary, but we will record the conference. So the presentations will be recorded. If people are unable to make it, you can visit www.spfpp.org/conferences. And you'll see the registration link there. You'll be able to register for it. And again, if you can't make it for any reason, the recordings will be made accessible to people who've purchased tickets.
Okay. And this is for like anyone, not just like practitioners or doctors. Okay.
Yes. And also, if you're a member of Something Positive for Positive People, so I have monthly memberships where people get access to our library of yoga classes to support them through navigating herpes stigma, as well as upcoming classes. Once the conference is done, I'll have my schedule. I just moved across the country. A lot of stuff happened in a very short period time. So I'm putting together new support groups to be able to meet on a bi-weekly basis, as well as to for people to be able to engage with each other on these digital events that I put together when we do workshops, ways to talk about your uh, status to partners, events like the upcoming Safe Sex Expo, as well
Hmm.
as the conference. Like this is included with membership. So just
Nice.
throwing that out there for people. Uh,
Okay.
so yeah, that's I think that's it. That's
All right. That's
it.
awesome. Yeah, that's so much. And anything that you said, I will definitely put in the show notes. If you think of something later, you're like, Jenny, I forgot about blah, blah, blah. You send it to me and I will get it in there because I want more people to know what you're doing, how you're working with this. And I just can't wait for all of the wonderful things that are coming in the next few years from you. So Courtney, I want to thank you so much for giving us your time and talking on the show today. I'm so grateful that you could be here. Ah, it's so good.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And so I just want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Storytime with the Intimacy Ally, where we say fuck no to the status quo. All
With
right, my lovelies.
with people.
Until next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. We hope you learned a bit more about putting the fire back in your romantic relationships, exploring communication and emotional readiness in all relationships, and how to expand your definition of intimacy so you can reach your relationship goals. Go to theintimacyally.com to subscribe and never miss an episode. Follow the links in the show notes to social media and events. Till next time, keep on learning, growing, and thinking. Storytime with the Intimacy Ally podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as health or mental health advice.